Hello everyone, introducing myself Souradip from IIT Kharagpur, India. I am going to present an oral presentation at this Agroecological Scientific Day workshop 4 session 3 titled as Beyond Preconceived Positionalities in Transdisciplinary Research, Inhabitant Interviewers Incubating Agroecological Transitions in the Indian Sundarbans Delta. In response to number of social and environmental challenges related to climate change, resource scarcity, poverty, etc., it involves different set of actors belonging to different organizations, interests, and activities, and takes up integrative and participatory research approaches to harness scientific knowledge for societal change. Transdisciplinary research, being one of such participatory forms, is operationalized in a formal research practice partnership consisting of organizations that includes academic and practice-based sources of knowledge and expertise in combination with political and administrative mandates and areas of responsibilities. The conceptual domain of transdisciplinary collaboration, depending on the key foundations of interaction, communication, and mutuality, aim to develop knowledge generation, mutual trust building and learning opportunities, and shared ownership. These two has constraints. Unknowingly or unwillingly, the notion of positionality gets induced in the course of transdisciplinary research, seems setting an agenda to generating outcome to have a finalized impact, which leads to some actor specific responsibilities. Those are classified among different sets of roles, including facilitation, intermediation, and moderation towards co-producing knowledge and generating high-end impacts. For agroecological research in the global south, it marks the involvement of transdisciplinary knowledge mobilization and tactics by bridging localized adaptive practices and mainstream scientific knowledge for viable agroecological transitions. In this context, the study presents or introduces a specific component of a transdisciplinary project called Engage for Sundarbans. This project involves academia, NGO, grassroots organizations, local government institutions, and community in transboundary Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove delta, stretched between the lower Gangetic deltaic part shared by India and Bangladesh. And this mangrove delta is also vulnerable to the threats of climate change. This project investigates the significance of community social resilience through utilizing local agroecology-based livelihood opportunities to discourage the discourse of managed retreat from this climate change vulnerable delta. For Indian Sundarban specifically in terms of agroecology-based livelihood opportunities, it explores the scope of inland fishing, one of the major localized or situated livelihood practices done in the Indian Sundarban. So these are the project objectives. So as a methodological approach of A to E, archival ethnographic experimentation as adhered for this project called Engage for Sundarbans, this study actually showcasing a specific component of this approach of A to E. That is the first E, the ethnographic method. And for this part, the specific object of this presentation is related to this ethnographic study, which attempts to assess the multiple accounts of risks and disaster impacts and localized coping and adaptive strategies in form of agroecological practices, that is inland fishing, in the study area, where it would further showcase the involvement of the inhabitant interviewers. So this is the way to craft the ethnographic survey and positing the involvement of inhabitant interviewers in this study. From the selection of study area to problem identification, then the preparation of the research design, having the willingness among the community or user groups to work as inhabitant interviewers, then selection of the survey tool, then sample selection and orientation of the community people working as inhabitant interviewer with the survey tool, and finally the completion of survey and data collection. So this is the study area Kumirmari village from Gosaba block, Indian Sundarban, having a unique feature of one village, one island, one Gram Panchayat. Gram Panchayat means the lowermost administrative unit of the three-tier rural governance system in India. It has 4,322 households, a total population of 17,451 dispersed across 34.15 square kilometer of an area. This study area is vulnerable to climate change induced cyclonic disaster, saline water intrusion, and coastal erosion. In this study, the project focuses for inland fishing as a mean for agroecological transition in Sundarbans. Because since time immemorial, the small-scale fishing practices are found to be one of the principal traditional occupation of Sundarbans, which finds the following categorizations of forest fishing and inland fishing. But the recent trend marks a gradual shift towards the practice of inland fishing, because the practice of forest fishing in the forested creeks, rivers, and rivulets that entails the risks of tiger and crocodile attacks. Also, this area, a biodiversity hotspot of global attention, enjoys a fortress type of conservation. So, therefore, due to strict forest law and sometimes atrocities and penalization by the corrupt forest officials, entails risks to the inhabitants working as forest fishers. Also, in the advent of Anthropocene, it marks a drop in fish stocks in the forested creeks. So they need to go deeper from the buffer region to the core region. That further entails and that further increases and enhances the risk factor. Despite this, there are prevalence of water resources in the island, and already there are customary practices of subsistence-based inland fishing, which found merits of income generation in the post-disaster phase, when all other livelihood opportunities like agricultural activities just took a halt due to salinity incursion in their lands. But in inland fishing, there are challenges also. Inland fishing is mostly done in the household water body and the locally excavated canals dispersed across the island. In terms of challenges, there are constraints of quality and quantity of the products. They are having fish feed, they are having problem of accessing fish feeds, accessing knowledge in terms of dosage and specific of fish feeds. There are problems of uneven growth of the catches, having larger skeletal growth with lean body like fish rickets, fin rods, swollen gills, etc., etc. They are also having lack of access to markets. They are have markets. Day by day, climate-induced risks and disasters are also affecting the mechanism of fish hatching and harvesting. And also, the cultivation of native breeds are getting eroded across the island. Despite such constraints, there are some opportunities, as I have already mentioned, the availability of water resources in majority households. For example, almost 3,000 households out of some 4,322 totality of households, there are own water bodies, and 26 excavated canals are functioning across the island. Also, there is a keenness among the community to pursue domestic fisheries, and there is an observation of enthusiasm across the youth of the island to pursue inland fishing against venturing into the forest for leading livelihood. Also, the qualitative engagement with the islanders marked their willingness to pursue fishing in cooperative canals for commercial purposes, which may offer the advantage to generate income for the small plot holders and landless sections of the islands. So, in terms of designing the ethnographic study to assess the drivers and dynamics, enablers and constraints of the local agroecological practices through this transdisciplinary project called Engage for Sundarbans, a highly mobilized community or user group partners shown their keenness to work as inhabitant interviewers to implement the survey tool and design, justifying their insiders' involvement in gathering the first-hand and instantaneously triangulated data from their neighborhood where they have been residing over generations. So, seven representatives from the community, three women and four men, they are mostly fishers and agricultural farmers in Kumirmari. They came to serve as inhabitant interviewers. Their, their age-old experience and exposures to the locally existing risk factors, disaster impacts, and agroecological practices were already there. And they took the initiative during the participatory kind of workshop to posit themselves willing to implement the research tool and survey design as TD partners for the project. Here are the details of these inhabitant interviewers. From the beginning of the research design through the participatory knowledge co-production workshops to develop the survey tool, they placed their input as a form of responsibilization as shown in the TD research as formulated in the TD research literatures in gaining knowledge in terms of fulfilling the objective of the research tool, which revealed the notion of equal participation towards increased accountability. And they proposed the following input on the research tool to incorporate as being exposed to the nuances of risks, disasters, as well as agroecological practices conducted in the island. So their inputs were on the village perceptions of the climate risk, way to managing those risks, way to cope and ensure staying in opposition to the advocacy towards displacement of people from this forest and let the forest pristine for biodiversity hotspot as propounded from the concepts like managed retreat, assessing the possible means for coping, assessing the available sets of assets and resources finding the constraints in the same, and tracing the essential supports or intervention to scale up their means of place-based or localized coping, and formulating the ways to access those means. So this is the justification behind their inclusion at, as an investigator for the survey, where they served as inhabitant interviewers. One, their belongingness to the study area, they are already known face, so no formal ice breaking is needed, unlike outside research investigators. So, and they would be capable of extracting more comprehensive accounts of risks and disaster impacts than an external interviewer. So apart from this, in terms of collating the drivers and dynamics of local risks as well as agroecological practices, they are also having an advantage of on-spot triangulation, where they could harness the methods of their triangulation memory in collecting the responses from the respondents. And for further probing, clarification, justification in case of having a new or different kind of insights or kind of faulty responses, they can anytime easily visit and revisit or access their respondents for further probing. So the inhabitant interviewers also registered their input on the sample selection, which was based on the different polling booths or clusters as per the electoral rule of India across the islands. So as per that, out of a total population of 4322 households, cluster-wise sample survey is done across the 16 clusters, and they have developed a booth-wise non-scaled map of Kumirmari during one of the knowledge co-production workshop as a knowledge product. So the process of a multi-stage cluster sampling is done that selected a number of 392 samples out of 4322 populations in the study area. So the survey tool used for the ethnographic study is SurveyCTO, a software-based survey tool which is compatible with Android and iOS smartphones, which also offers online operation facilities and allows the creator to create complex survey design as well as checking previews and revision through test runs, and also instant facility of data monitoring and generating reports in various forms, including Excel and all. Apart from this, this survey tool is compatible with other external analytical tools like Strata. So here is the mobile interface of the survey tool. A vernacular version is made for the Indian counterpart, considering the language barrier of the inhabitant interviewers as well as the respondents across the island. Their orientation on the survey tool followed the following steps, and five of the out of seven inhabitant interviewers, five IIs or inhabitant interviewers were beginners with the smartphone. So they have to undergo an orientation to get familiar with the questionnaire and the survey tool. They need to overcome the challenges. They need to undergo demo preparation of surveying or interviewing. And finally, the distribution of work is chalked out among them. And academic groups were there in terms of conducting the orientation. The challenges they faced were categorized into two types. One, the technical, including handling the mobile interface and shifting to different pages, resuming the survey once a call has come or the battery gets run off, learning the unique ID of the survey form. Due to ethical things and all, each of the survey form was assigned with one unique ID. to locate the response of the respondents. So it would take time to grab the nitty-gritty of the unique nitty-gritty and significance of unique ID and how it works and how it is needed to get registered to conduct a survey. Keeping as the survey is conducted through a survey tool, so keeping an essential amount of storage was required and cleaning the art of cleaning junk was required for them. And they had some technical challenges or glitches in terms of recording lat long for the GPS location of the household. For approach-based challenges, there were the constraints of remembering the sequential flow, filling up the open-ended or descriptive responses, as many of them, that is 5 people were beginners with registering responses on smartphone interface. They need to know the art of communication and not to elongate the interview too much. And they need to overcome the challenge if they had to encounter or face some out of box responses, or they need to undergo the art of combating the challenges with faulty data in while saving the form before sending. So in the due process of survey, to overcome such challenges, for technical ones, they kept a notebook with them and writing down the entire operational process during the orientation workshops, and later they memorized the whole thing while returning to their place and rehearse the same with their new smartphones. And they have utilized a fresh, unused scene to avoid the disturbance of unnecessary or sudden or emergency phone calls during the interviews. They need to learn the art of cleaning junk and recording lat long. Also, a separate WhatsApp group was created by them to coordinate or exchange with the academic researchers frequently in terms of further clarifications, questions, and modifications or queries in terms of survey. For approach-based things, each of them was assigned with their own clusters and neighborhood clusters for having a better mobility to the respondents' houses. They have to memorize the sequential flow. Here, they involved or utilized their mastery of acting in the local plays, the traditional folk practice of folklores, locally called Palagan in Indian Sundarbans. And many of these inhabitants participate as actors in such Palagans. So where they have to memorize a long script. That mastery was optimized for memorizing the sequential flow of the questionnaire. And they also gained the art of noting the responses which could be extracted through merely observations while they are entering into a household. Also, they carried the notebook and noted down the fresh insights and observations for further probing, as well as for the descriptive and open-ended kind of questions, where they kept those as written for further data entry and kept the form as saved. And they learned the art of communicating questions following a sequential flow and reducing the time of engagement with the households, thus not to elongate the discussion. And for faulty data entry and for data entry for the open-ended questions, a local monitoring mechanism and local scrutiny mechanism with the saved forms were conducted by one of the key leaders of the local community. And he checked all those responses, and then once these are approved, then these people will send the responses to the back end. Now, the household survey took place from March 28, 2014, 2024 to April 22, 2024. The random stratified sampling is followed in this regard. For such cases, the inhabitant interviewers, while assigned to their clusters, they went to their assigned clusters or allocated clusters, they just dropped a pen, the tip of the pen indicating to a random house. They just first visited to that house, then they went to the next house, leaving the 8 households in between. And if the household is deserted or abandoned, then they go for the next house, and for the next onward, they followed the same rule, leaving the 8 households in between. And they have tracked the GPS location of the household. So here is a GPS location of the household samples of the data collected across the island. So summarization of the study, transdisciplinary research unintentionally or unwillingly, despite having its own conceptual genre that may stereotype the roles of different partners in times of allocating responsibility. And also, hierarchy remains in terms of work distribution, responsibility, and commitments. And for conducting for projects targeting viable agroecological transitions across the world are not free from such biases. But here, considering the aforementioned challenges of transdisciplinary research, the involvement of inhabitant interviewers in these agroecological based projects, harnessing the community awareness, mobilization, trust building, and involvement and engagement of inhabitant interviewers that marked an initial observation of development of notion of agency among the user groups as they evolve from beneficiaries to inhabitant interviewers. From setting agenda and interaction with the stakeholders, considering the asymmetry among the partners, which needs the essentiality, which actually needs the essentiality of brokers or roles of intermediaries or negotiators. Here, the involvement of inhabitant interviewers simultaneously hold the role of intermediation and beneficiary of this transdisciplinary intervention that somehow reduces the asymmetry and divisions. They are encouraged to the study area as inhabitants, on the one hand, becomes crucial in prioritizing the set of agendas. On the other, it dilutes the initial ice breaking of facilitation and interaction with the user groups without involving external moderation. Thus, it enhances the capacity of a transdisciplinary research in terms of crafting strong cohesion with people meant to be benefited. In terms of sharing work responsibility and incorporate work responsibility, evolving as enumerators from the beneficiaries in tapping their own voice that critically interrogates the question of interrogates or questions the conventional responsibility mechanism which is allocated in partnership research as per the known set of skills and social obligations. It induces an inherent accountability to the community that in turn offered a notion of enhanced work responsibility culture, discarding the previous barriers in the transdisciplinary research. Also, in terms of capacity building and data dissemination, data dissemination and research merits, it may lead to the better framing and application of the essence of stakeholdership, shared ownership, as their dual involvement as in the overlapping role of beneficiary and intermediaries and investigators of household survey or ethnographic survey process, that was imperative in channelized, more comprehensive, localized, bottom-up, need-based aspiration for transdisciplinary research. And from the right-based approach, at the one end, there are duty bearers, and the other end, there are right holders. So the role of this community was mere right holders. In between, there are bystanders. Through this involvement or evolution as inhabitant interviewers from beneficiaries, they not only accelerated themselves from the role of right holders to bystanders, as also they have marked a duality of responsibility, again strengthening the notion of responsibilization in transdisciplinary research, simultaneously serving as in the overlapping role of bystanders and right holders. In sum, the success of a transdisciplinary intervention relies upon addressing the actual set of beneficiaries beyond the domain of science and reiterative interaction with such concerned populations. When a part of beneficiaries or user groups evolve themselves as facilitating agents or actors, then it eases the translation of the scientific findings, that is output of results, to context specific things, that is called outcome, to a larger impact that has the capacity to uphold the community embedment. These are the observations initially noted from this study. Thanking you again and sharing my warm wishes to all.